Morning. Hello there. I just wanted to go through a Twitter thread about the insulin cases. Well, one in particular, I think, more the case of baby F, one of the so-called smoking gun cases. There's a very good Twitter thread which is started by Hugh Osmond. That's Hugh Osmond, Osmond. And he says, well, the attached evidence alone should render the Lucy Letby conviction unsafe. Why, he asks? Well, because seemingly, contrary to Dewey Evans' sworn testimony, Dr. Brearey has found this insulin test anomaly by trawling through past records of babies that didn't die, which is a huge universe in which there are bound to be false test results, because testing errors are quite frequent. A lot of other people have been saying that as well, that there are all sorts of reasons for tests going wrong. Got to keep mentioning, of course, that these aren't the correct tests to ascertain whether exogenous or synthetic insulin were added to these TPN bags. The bags themselves were never tested. So there was no proof that insulin was added to these bags in any way whatsoever. But the tweet goes on to say, from Hugh Osmond, but the problem is that the baby lived and was fine. Yeah, I mean, it didn't even register as a crash, But now we know that crashes weren't recorded. Well, a crash is what you want it to be, when you want it to be, and whether a certain person is on duty, isn't it? Hugh Osmond goes on to say, so it was assumed by the consultants at that time that it was a testing error. That's exactly what they assumed, which it almost certainly was. So Hugh Osmond is someone who has trained in medicine. Because if the test was accurate, the insulin level recorded should have killed the baby for sure. Yeah, that's been said a number of times in the past. We've covered that. The level was on this test was so high that the baby wouldn't have survived it, but it didn't even register as causing it a very serious problem. There was certain issues for a short period of time, and the baby went home. That's been noted in various reports recently in the mainstream media. So there are two massive and fundamental problems with this evidence, Hugh goes on to say. Trawling through records of babies that didn't die makes finding erroneous tests results inevitable. The number of babies is big, testing errors happen. So finding some errors is inevitable and means nothing. It cannot be evidence. Point 2, he says the baby didn't die. Well, it wasn't even in a very serious state of ill health at all, despite the apparent massive insulin level shown by the test, which that test you can't rely on again, got to keep saying that, which makes it even more certain that it was an error, as was thought by the consultants at the time. So this is baby F we're talking about. The near certain explanation is therefore that it was a testing error, which is common, as anyone working in a lab knows. And given that the alleged insulin cases were the major plank of the medical evidence for the prosecution, behind which all the other evidence followed, the conviction should be set aside, absolutely. I mean, Evans said himself in these interviews, that once they had this so-called insulin evidence, the smoking gun, then they could prove it. They could prove it all, that somebody was deliberately doing that, doing harm. As I've said in lots of videos before, the so-called air embolism cases wouldn't have got there on their own. These wouldn't have got there on their own. But these have no standing. These have no reliability whatsoever, these so-called smoking gun cases, babies F and L. But it goes on here. There's a bit of a graphic from the BBC, some reporting related to spring 2018. So it was reported about spring 2018. This is the BBC. Evidence of a poisoner. And it goes as follows. It reads as follows. Lucy Letby had not yet been arrested in spring 2018, and was still working at the hospital's Risk and Patient Safety Office. But Operation Hummingbird was in full swing, and Dr. Brearey was helping the police with their investigation. There's a bit highlighted here that Hugh Osmond has highlighted. Late one evening, this is the storytelling aspect of it. You'll see why in a minute. Late one evening, he was going through some historic medical records, like you do, when he discovered a blood test from 2015. He discovered a blood test. Remember that. Remember this bit because it's going to come up as important in a minute. He discovered a blood test in 2015, and that's something that he stated as well, and something that Evans has related as well, for one of the babies on his unit, although Evans also says something that contradicts this. So, late one evening, he's going through them. He discovers a blood test from 2015 for one of the babies on his unit. It recorded dangerous levels of insulin in the baby's bloodstream. Well, so it said anyway. The significance of the test result had been missed at the time. This is a BBC report. The body produces insulin naturally, but when it does, it also produces a substance called C-peptide. The problem with the insulin reading Dr. Brearey was looking at was that the C-peptide measurement was almost zero. It was evidence that the insulin had not been produced naturally by the baby's body, that had instead been administered. Well, all that's up for grabs now. It made me feel sick. Well, it always has been. It made me feel sick, Dr. Brearey recalls. It was quite clear that this baby had been poisoned by insulin. Right, so can I go on here in this? I'll leave a link to the Twitter thread. The next tweet says, the fact that Dr. Brearey found this test anomaly by trawling past records and clearly passed on his theory to the police and Evans appears to be totally at odds with what Evans says. So there's another selection of text here in which Evans is stating, in contradiction to what you just heard there about Brearey's experience. And then a little later, Evans says, in 2018, I reviewed 2 more cases, that's Evans speaking, and these were the insulin poisoning cases, and these had not been suspected by anyone before this. And it's only thanks to Cheshire Police's methodical way of looking at the cases that both insulin poisonings were found. So Evans is saying it's like, well, the police found it and they passed it on to Evans and Evans realised it. Evans worked it out. But here we're seeing Brearey worked out. But we're going to hear a third thing in a minute. We're going to hear a third option. It can't all be true. 2 of them can't be true in any one universe. But they want you to believe that all 3 are true now. Because, and this is where it comes to something that an account called Rex v Lucy Letby, full disclosure, the handle of that on Twitter is @Rex versus Lucy Letby, which is a good account to follow, has found something in the Thirlwall reporting from the 10th of September. So I think that was the first day of reporting, I think. First day of the inquiry, the Thirlwall Inquiry. And Rex v Lucy Letby, full disclosure, says, well, in reply to Hugh Osmond, who started this thread, oh, well, it's a little worse, in fact. And please note, Rex v Lucy Letby says, none of this was discussed at the trial. While on maternity leave in June 2017, so the year before, and 2 years after she assumed it to be a dodgy test in August 2015, that's with regard to baby F, a doctor, we're calling ZA because she's another anonymous doctor that's been offering evidence to the Thirlwall Inquiry, and this has been stated on the 10th of September of this year. The doctor emailed Brearey in 2017, not 2018. And then Brearey sits on that information and then obviously lied to the police. He's lied to the police, saying that he found it in 2018 when he's looking through the notes one evening. That's where we are. And when you see the link, and obviously you've got to be on Twitter to see this this thread of tweets. But that's why I'm reading it out to people here, just in case you're not on Twitter. And it's from page 70 of and there's a link given of the Thirlwall Inquiry, reporting from the 10th of September. And there's a bit of text selected here from the Thirlwall Inquiry related to this Dr. Z.A., and it goes as follows. It was not until 2017 that the issue of deliberate administration of insulin seems to have been raised. So remember, not Brearey doing it in 2018 on his own, not Evans being, as he said, the first person to realise it. So in contradiction to both those stories, we've got this Dr. Z.A., who's anonymous, who was working at that time, back in August 2015, and this Dr. Z.A. is on maternity leave, by the way, in 2017. And in the middle of maternity leave, out of nowhere, it just pops into her head. She says, and this is in quotes that she's given to the Thirlwall Inquiry, "When I was on maternity leave in 2017, it occurred to me," and this is June 2017, "that the intentional administration that seemed impossible at the time could have happened." It goes on to clarify. On the 6th of June 2017, Dr. Z.A. sent an email to Dr. Brearey raising her concerns about insulin. By this stage, the police had already been contacted and investigations were taken forward. So Dr. Z.A. is on maternity leave, she's not in the unit. And we're only a month into the Hummingbird inquiry there. The Hummingbird investigation, only a month in, because it starts in May, doesn't it, 2017. And there's somebody that's not even working there. They're still contracted, but they're on maternity leave. They're at home. They're thinking, well, 2 years ago, that test that I thought was obviously wrong, now I think that must be right. And I'll ring up Dr. Brearey about it. And she does. She gives testimony to this. And she emails him on the 6th of June 2017. And what does he do for a year? He doesn't tell anybody about it for a year. He doesn't tell anyone. And more than that, he pretends it was him that found it. And the whole story of the prosecution is that he found it. And then you've got other statements where Evans said he was the first person to find it. This is insanity, isn't it? Well, it's just not insanity. It's marker after marker after marker of red flag after red flag of the complete absurdity and the construction of it, the con of it, as I keep thinking it and terming it as. The framing of an innocent person. And so you'll always find cracks in it. And these aren't cracks, these are massive, great big fissures, aren't they, So you got this doctor in 2017. What does it remind you of? What does it remind you of where you've got Brearey here being sent an email on the 6th of June 2017, right? Which is a month after the Hummingbird investigation has started. So he knows there's an investigation underway that he's instigated. He's the main instigator of it. And he's been told by this Dr. Z.A. about this, what Dr. Z.A. believes is, that sounds like intentional administration of insulin. Whereas at the time, 2 years before, this is somebody's on maternity leave, just clicks into their head. Where does that come from? At the time, she thought it was a false test. It can be a false test when they want it to be, and when they need it to be to frame somebody, it suddenly becomes 100% reliable. But my question was, what does it remind you of? Brearey here, sitting on this information from Dr. Z.A., which is all bogus anyway, but anyway, nonetheless, sitting on this information from the 6th of June 2017 until spring the next year, where he pretends that he's found it, But he hasn't said a word to anybody in all that time. Doesn't enter the investigation. What it reminds us of, obviously, is what Jayaram did. In which he, according to the court and according to the prosecution, virtually catches somebody trying to attempting to murder baby K, in all these dates in my head, in February 2016, and doesn't mention it formally in any way whatsoever. Probably whispering about it to the other doctors and to Brearey, of course, but doesn't mention it formally to anybody in management until 13 months later. So this is a bit of a repeat of that, isn't it? So they've both done it. They both sat on what ends up being, according to the prosecution, absolutely hard and fast evidence of a murderer at work. And they're sitting on the information, both of them, about different instances for a year. It's insane. It just doesn't make any sense, does it? Come on, it doesn't make any sense at all. And he's also lying to the police, saying he's found it. And whereas it's been given, and somebody says in this thread, why do you think he lied? Well, because he had to. Because because why is it? How can he explain? Why did he lie about him finding it? Well, because he's been told about it almost a year before by this Dr. ZA, who somehow, what's triggered it? Somebody else in the thread asks, I can't remember who, on the Twitter, what's triggered Dr. ZA on maternity leave when you'd imagine her thoughts are elsewhere, suddenly it popping into her head? Obviously someone's informed her. I'd say obviously, I'm assuming someone's informed her that there's a police investigation. There's a lot of chatter going on, isn't there? So by June 2017, Hummingbird started. She's probably read it in the paper that the police are investigating, and it's popped into her head, oh God, that test that I thought was obviously a mistake, showing that the tests can be easily deemed as errors and can be false tests, false readings. And got to keep having that caveat that it's not a test, it wasn't the appropriate test to test for synthetic insulin. There's a bit more in this thread. I don't want to miss anything out because it's vital. Oh yes, of course. And then Ian Crawford, who's another gentleman on Twitter, makes the point that was made in the Private Eye article recently by Richard Hammond, that there and in other articles as well. There's so much reporting on it now. I can't really remember exactly who said it first, but it's coming out here thick and fast, isn't it? That there was a third baby with a similar high insulin and low C-peptide level. The third baby. Evans has acknowledged this in an interview as well. When Professor Hall, the defence expert who was never called by Myers, found out about it, and when he was interviewed in one of these recent articles, he was very surprised and wished he'd known about that. In other words, you can have these other instances where you get these high insulin, low C-peptide levels, and if it doesn't suit their purposes, it's not a smoking gun, it's just something you can ignore. They haven't explicitly said why they ignored it, i.e. the police or the hospital. But if it's got the same markers as somebody that they're saying is represents an attempted murder, but they can just drop other ones that are inconvenient, it just shows how absolutely bankrupt this is. It's obvious, isn't it? So just to reiterate, you've got baby F and baby L with these allegedly high insulin, because I think that probably the tests are wrong. The tests are wrong in terms of establishing it anyway, but the tests are errors. And they were deemed errors by the doctors at the time. That's why they didn't follow them up at COCH. So you've got baby F and a baby L with those high insulin, low C-peptide readings. Nobody takes any notice of them. Oh, well, they're obviously wrong. but they end up being the smoking gun of in a made up serial killer case, in a fabricated case. But you got a third one. You got a third one that I from memory now, I think it's because the stories are so, they're not holding together in any way whatsoever. It's all breaking down. But I believe that Evans says that he finds the third one. I believe that's right. It doesn't matter who finds the third one. There was a third one found, and it's been acknowledged. I read something yesterday in which Evans says that the reading for the insulin was over 1,000. The C peptide was low, and he said that then that's very abnormal. I.e., it's a similarity to these other two cases, which end up being attempted murder convictions, and they were the first ones the jury came through with, and unanimously. They pushed everything else through on these. I don't think it would have got to a trial even without these, and these are a complete basket case, as you're seeing. So you've got this third one that they just leave that one. These other two are the hinge, or the mainstay of their prosecution case, but they've got a third one, but they're not going to use it. Can you guess why they're not going to use it? Well, because they can't attach it to Lucy Letby. So you've got the same set of material that they're using, the same type of material, the same instance, as it were, but they just drop it conveniently and say, well, they've not explicitly said why they've dropped it, because it's embarrassing to them, isn't it? Because they can't explain it. They'd have to say one or two things. One of two things they've got to say. They've got to say either, well, for that one, the test was obviously unreliable. And then you'd say to them, well, why isn't it unreliable for these other two then? The ones that you brought to charges and convictions. Why isn't it unreliable for them? Or they'll say, yeah, that test was reliable, but Lucy Letby wasn't on duty. And then you say, well, so there's obviously another quote-unquote poisoner at work that you just didn't bother following up then, is it? Because you're saying these other two were a result of a poisoner at work, but you've got this third one, which has got a similar disparity between the C-peptide and the insulin, and you're letting that one go because you can't attach it to Lucy Letby. Is that what you're saying? Yeah, that's what we're saying. So who's done that one? Who was the poisoner there then? Oh, well, sorry, we can't answer anymore, and we're not going to no comment. There'd be no commenting you. They'd be saying no comment. I don't want to miss anything on this. I'm just going to open this up a bit. There were some other bits. Yeah, Rex v Lucy Letby full disclosure, the Twitter account, which is at Rex versus Lucy Letby. You'll see all this if you're on Twitter, but I'm just mentioning it. It's not coming out of my head, and it's related to reports in the Thirlwall Inquiry and BBC reports. This isn't stuff people are making up. And it's related to what Evans has said. It's related to what Brearey has said and claimed. It's related to what this anonymous doctor has said and claimed and said. I don't know if are they under oath at the Thirlwall Inquiry? But I don't know. I don't know if they're under oath, actually. And you've got this, so from page 72 of the Thirlwall Inquiry on the 10th of September, you've got Mr. Ian Harvey, who was the medical director, saying that, he wasn't notified. Before he retired, he wasn't notified about any of this. So I think he retires in 2017. They kind of push him out. They push Tony Chambers out because those two had supported Lucy Letby. There's a vote of no confidence, and they push them out, and I think they jump before they're pushed, both of them. They know they're going to be pushed because they're being essentially bullied in the same way that Lucy Letby was, because they'd stuck up for Lucy Letby, and they'd actually tried to do the right thing to a certain degree, and until they didn't, until they should never have removed Lucy Letby in July 2016, because they had no reason to. There's no evidence of her being incompetent. They showed no reason to remove her from... I think they should have gone in much harder with the GMC and reported those consultants straight away. But they were trying to placate them in the end. They sort of fought to a certain extent for Lucy Letby, and they were wanting her to come back. That is true. But they shouldn't have removed her from her duties. That's my thoughts on it. So in this other bit from page 72 of the Thirlwall Inquiry from the 10th of September, is it the 10th? Let's have a look. Yeah, I think it's the 10th, that is, of this year. Mr. Ian Harvey says, this situation, the insulin result, was not reported to me at any time before my retirement. It should have been. And then it goes on to repeat, it was not until 2017 that the issue of deliberate administration of insulin, this is a bit I've read before, was raised by Dr. ZA. And when she's on maternity leave. So what's prompted her doing that? She's heard, obviously, from her colleagues, and she's read in the paper the police are involved. A light bulb goes off in her head, and she said, oh, that test that I thought was obviously wrong and obviously a mistake, because, you know, the baby would have probably died, as other people have said, the baby would have died without that level of insulin, and the baby was fine, actually. The baby was fine, went home the next day. You know, it corrected, it corrected itself, the situation. And there's another bit here to do with hyperinsulinism. I don't want to miss that. I've got to find that a minute. Oh, I found it. I'm glad I looked for that. There's somebody mentioned here called Russell Scotland. So these are all people that are constantly tweeting about this, who have gone into a lot of the detail about it, that are bringing elements of the story together here, or the facts of the matter really, is that this third baby that we've been talking about, that they don't really care about it because they can't attach the test results to Lucy Letby, obviously. You know, you can bet your bottom dollar that if they could have, they would have, wouldn't they? They would have had 3 insulin poisonings charged against Lucy Letby, wouldn't they, if they could have? It's obvious, isn't it? So they've dropped it for some reason. This third case, the Evans note, is very abnormal, and is why isn't that a attempted murder charge of whomsoever, of some other second murderer on the ward, rather than a false test, or this, as you'll hear now, that the test could be explainable, as Russell Scotland says here, as hyperinsulinism, which is a condition, obviously, where the baby is producing a very an extreme amount of insulin. And it's that is a condition that Dr. Brearey knows about himself, because he co-authored a paper on it. So Brearey is fully aware of the condition of hyperinsulinism. There's a part of it here in which I can't find it at the moment, but when this third baby is transferred, that's where the baby the third baby, and I can't remember where they've got this reporting from. I'd have to find that specifically, but I know it's been reported, or I've seen it reported, where this third baby, this third test that they ignore, the baby has this condition called hyperinsulinism, and that is found at a tertiary level unit when the baby is moved from the Countess of Chester Hospital, but I can't find that at the moment. I'll have to look for that. Oh yeah, the paper that Brearey was involved in, which is written with regard to pediatric diabetes. It says increased referrals for congenital hyperinsulinism. Genetic testing in children with trisomy 21 reflects the high burden of non-genetic risk factors in this group. He's listed there as one of the authors of this paper with regard to hyperinsulinism. Okay. Oh, I found it now, and it's something I've already actually said in this video so far, and it's from the Private Eye. Well, it's somebody talking about the Private Eye article, in which I don't have that to hand, but it's just saying here there was a third baby with similar high insulin, low C-peptide levels. And it says here, apparently the baby was transferred to Alder Hay, who diagnosed the baby with hyperinsulinism. I'd have to look at the Private Eye article, and if it's apparently or not, I'm not sure what apparently means there. Is it or is it not the case? Other people are claiming there are fourth and fifth baby and sixth baby with abnormally high insulin, low C-peptide readings. Somebody did something else I want to look at here. Somebody did a Freedom of Information request regarding insulin test results across this period of time, and they created this. They got the results back, and it shows up the vertical column C-peptide, and down the horizontal insulin results. So these are these tests, and they've got a marker here for child L, and there are some other babies. I think this is of the area, actually. I don't think it's just COCH. I saw this from a Twitter account called Ron Winter, but I don't know who actually did the Freedom of Information request. It may have been Ron Winter who did that. But this is the response they got from the hospital, is this graph from that Freedom of Information request, which shows the readings for child L not to be a particular anomaly. I mean, it's a bit of an outlier, but there are other ones there as well. I think from other hospitals in that region with similar results. So, which begs the question, or you'd want to ask the question: Are there serial killers in these, or poisoners in all these other hospitals as well, with these other similar results? So that's another aspect of it. I mean, there's so much of it there. I'd like to find that. I think you'll have to look at the Private Eye actually to confirm that, and whether that claim about hyperinsulinism in that third baby is definite. So we're looking at different possibilities here, aren't we? Either there's a condition that explains it, hyperinsulinism, and then why might it not explain some of the other cases? And did they test for it? Was it tested for? And there's other conditions that Dr. McConville has gone into, which he states in his podcasts and his podcast with Peter Elston, that there are other conditions that show that it's just not a stable thing to do these readings of insulin with the babies, that there can be other causes of these high readings, and they're not reliable. They're not reliable, and they're not the same as doing it with an adult or an older child. I can't go independently into the medical stuff because I'm not medically trained, but I'm just trying to relate this to anyone who watches this video. That's why I say you've just got to listen to the podcast of Dr. McConville about that. So they're either false readings, because the test, there's an error on the test because it wasn't done correctly, the samples weren't kept correctly, they weren't stored correctly, something was wrong with the machine, whatever. Or there's hyperinsulinism there going on, and there's the fact that these tests per se, as a whole, they don't measure and they don't confirm synthetic or exogenous insulin. You need these mass spectrometry tests, I think they're called. There's slightly longer description for those tests, but they're done in a specialist forensic lab, and they weren't done. and they can't be the defence can't repeat these tests to check them because the blood samples have gone. So you haven't even got never had the opportunity to properly test this evidence. It wasn't allowed to be tested. It's all down to a bit of paper in the medical notes that the doctors at the time thought, well, that's obviously wrong. Dr. Z.A. at the time in 2015 for baby F looked at the result. Oh, that's obviously wrong, that test. That's how simply they can dismiss it. But when you're framing somebody for murder and you're trying to just marshal every bit of information in the service of framing them, then what was just dismissed very easily and blithely before, without a care in the world really, can be then turned into the smoking gun for a serial killer, a poisoner here. Where the babies went home the next day or the day after, and it didn't even really register as a major problem for them. Despite that test result again, had it been real, had it been reliable, that level of insulin, if it had been synthetic insulin, it would have killed the baby. As many people have said. So it's got so many holes in it. It's a colander, It's crazy, isn't it? It's wicked. It's just wicked. I don't know if there's any more I can say about it. I'll put the link here to that, and if you're on Twitter, some of you, some of the people that might watch this, then or join it, and you can see these threads firsthand. But I don't know if you're not on Twitter whether you can see it or not if you click the link. Hopefully you can. I don't know. But the people who are on it, then you can just follow. And this stuff's going to be unearthed more and more. So you've got Brearey obviously lying to the police, saying that he found it, but he's been told about it nearly a year before by this Dr. Z.A., and he said nothing to nobody while the police investigation's been going on. You couldn't make it up, but they're making it up. That's the point. You and I wouldn't make it up. Decent, honest people wouldn't make it up, but they're making it up to fit their purposes. The police are making it up to fit their purposes. The prosecution are. What that Baker KC did at the Thirlwall Inquiry the other day about putting out this complete or misinformation, just wrongness, major wrongness out to the country at large, really, because it's reported and the papers report on it about these rates of extubation in hospitals being 1%, when he's got it completely wrong. He's not bothered to research that and verify it in any way whatsoever. That's the same level of quality of evidence that they've got all through that trial in 2023. It doesn't go beyond that. It's just got a different set of hired guns just nodding it all through, like Bowen nods through Evans's rubbish. She doesn't do anything independent at all. Bowen. They're just people on a payroll. They're a bunch of people without any conscience, and they're being called experts on a payroll for the prosecution, the CPS. CPS are paying them, and they do what they need to do to stay on team and to support the team. And the team wants to win, like in a game. It's a game to them. They want to win, and they win. They win. Doesn't matter that it's by cheating and lies and fakery and construction and a tissue of lies, as somebody might have said in some old-fashioned court drama. A tissue of lies and fabrication. Doesn't seem to matter. Anyway, I hope that was reasonably clear, and it will be clear if you read the tweet thread there. And it's giving it's not just people on Twitter just opining off the top of their head. They're looking at the evidence that was supplied to the court from the people involved, and more latterly to the Thirlwall Inquiry and reported by the Thirlwall Inquiry. So it's not supposition here. These are statements being made, either to the court, from last year, or to the Thirlwall Inquiry. So, well, there we are. Thanks for listening. All the best. Bye-bye.